So every time you say yes to something new, you say no to something that you previously committed to or promised your attention to. So recently we had this client who we had to let go because the relationship was not working for both of us, I imagine. And it was a situation where we were spending 80% of our time dealing with issues that were coming up from this one client. And every other client that we have was paying the cost for it because we're not dedicating enough time or attention to them. And that was becoming a problem. But the contract was ending, and we had the option to terminate the relationship and ask her not to renew the contract. But no one wanted to make that decision to let her go because no one wants to see money going, right? And so we kept dragging our feet about making that decision until eventually the contract was almost running out and she brought some money to renew it. And we happily took it, hoping that things would be better this time. But the same thing happened only 2 or 3 short weeks later. And so then it became unanimous that we had to let her go. And so we did. But that got me thinking about why we find it so hard to make hard decisions and say no when we need to, and we stand to benefit from the situation that gets us into. Now, after the client was gone, she called me a few days later to thank me for us ending that relationship because now it had forced her to think about what really she needed and to then consider who would be the best person to go to solve those problems that she had. And so that took me down a rabbit hole trying to find out about how and what you could do to make it easier for you to say no or to end relationships or to terminate things that are no longer serving you or are proving to be more costly than beneficial going forward. And the first thing was the fact that it's hard to say no because we don't usually see the trade off. And so we don't usually measure the new request that we get against everything else it will compete with. We usually measure it in isolation, and that brings the problem because, in our case, for example, think about all the other clients who were paying clients too, but they were paying the cost of our indecision because we didn't have enough time to dedicate to them because we were busy putting off fires from this one client. And that can be the case with the family event that you're being called to that will take you away from everything else you have to do. You don't have to think about that in isolation, although you might have other reasons for not going if we're being completely honest. But you have to think about the other things that that event will be competing with, or the drinks with friends, or maybe even that movie that you want to watch. The question is, do you pause to think about what else you could be doing with that time or that energy that you would dedicate to this one thing? Your no would be that much more important because you'll be doing it for a very good reason and you'll know exactly why you're doing it for because you know at what expense your yes will come. Most of us think that saying no or standing your ground has to be dramatic, like a bang on the table and declaration of independence or something like that. When in reality, sometimes it could be just as good as knowing what's important from what's not. Because then when you have to say yes or no, you know the decision becomes very easy because you already know what matters. And just like any skill you have to develop, there's a spectrum between where you are right now and the ideal form of that skill. To say no today, you could wiggle your way out of a situation that you don't want to be involved in. You could evade, you could deflect as the starting point, and then slowly work your way up towards being able to say a clear and direct no when you want to say no. And in between, it could be things like saying no partially, because maybe somebody wants help from you, but you're willing to help up to a certain point. And past that point, maybe now that you've made it known that you're willing to help until this point, then they're forced to look for help to cover the gap that you leave or that you're not willing to be a part of. Or maybe they leave you alone entirely and decide to get someone else to help them with this thing that they want to do. And so you don't have to be able to say no right now outright. You just have to know that it's important to say no and to stand your ground when you need to, and work your way towards that slowly. And for right now, the only thing that matters is the end result. You being able to find a way to not get involved where you don't want to. And then slowly get to a point where you can actually be clear about saying no and very direct. And the last thing is the social cost of saying no. So we're social creatures and we've evolved to be that way. And so even though right now it's not as beneficial as it was to our survival, we still tend to want to be accepted and wanted by those people around us. And so sometimes we'll say yes when we mean no because we don't want to anger those people that we say no to. We don't want to look unreasonable and get cast out because we're not willing to participate in whatever game is being played. But the next time you're faced with such a decision, think about how you never really fully avoid the social cost, because the difference between you saying no right now or yes is essentially deciding when you're going to pay the social cost, because you'll pay it regardless. Because if you say no right now, if you say yes right now when you mean no, and you string whoever made the request along for as long as you will, eventually you'll still hurt them because they will catch on to the fact that you're not fully participating in this thing. You're not as willing as you pretend to be. And they will eventually lose respect in you because they will have asked you and expected you to tell them exactly what you want to do, whether or not you're willing to be involved. And you said yes because you are scared of their reaction. Guess what? It's better you get that reaction today and disappoint them right now, but at least you enable yourself to draw the boundaries sooner rather than later. Because if you wait for later, then that's potentially damaging for the relationship even. And so think about that the next time you avoid saying no. In the end, the question is, why should you learn to say no? And the answer to that question is very simple. It's you need to learn to say no so that you can be able to conserve energy, you can conserve time, you can conserve effort and mental bandwidth so that you're able to commit that to those things that you deem important and you want to dedicate your time to or be involved in. And so you're not trying to say no so that you don't help others or you become a bad person or you're not, or you become a person who cannot be depended on. It's so that when you decide to say yes, then you can fully commit and you can be fully present to deliver what you promise, to participate in whatever has been asked of you without putting it at a risk to those other things that you will say yes to that you don't want, you shouldn't or don't want to. And so think about that. See you on the next one. Bye.